Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. Zohran Madawi is elected mayor of New York City in a very historic upset. Donald Trump blames his absence from balance and the government shutdown for Republican defeats in recent election. The U.S. federal government shutdown becomes the longest in U.S. history, and we're just seeing the beginning of the fallout. Claudia Sheinbaum denies that the U.S. will send troops into Mexico despite reports of planning. It's not going to happen, she stated. Sean Duffy warns that if the shutdown continues, part of U.S. airspace may be closed next week due to staffing shortages. We're going to talk about it. There's so much to cover here this morning, and believe me, it ain't nothing we're not used to. I guess at one point in time, this race was close because it's within a 9% range that you guys see. Madawi wins at 50.4% over a million votes, and Andrew Cuomo coming in a close second, roughly 8.7%. Again, I'm just looking at it very quickly here. 854,000, almost 855,000 votes. And Curtis Willard wasn't even close. And of course, Eric Adams only got 0.3%. They got tired of Eric Adams there in New York. So what we're missing here, ladies and gentlemen, is that Zohran Madawi has been elected. He's been elected to the mayor of New York City, marking a very historic milestone. He's the first Muslim, the first South Asian mayor of the city, and his victory signals a very historic major shift. This is a young democratic socialist rising in a city long dominated by political machines. And this is for all communities, whether it be Black, white, Hispanic, Middle Eastern, Muslim, Christian. It raises the question, will this bring our issues into sharper focus, or will the establishment just pivot behind a new face? I wonder a lot of the campaign promises that Madawi actually made, I wonder he's going to fulfill those promises. Okay. This is a New York first, by the way. First and foremost, New York City at one point in time was the foundation of economics in America. Anytime people talk about capitalism, it would always New York City. But now New York City is now becoming a democratic socialist society. It's coming slowly a democratic socialist electorate, because when we look at the winning of Madawi, my apologies. Again, I'm trying to get used to saying his name, and it's not to be funny. But Madawi, when we look at this, a lot of the socialist policies that he actually put into place. And to think that New York City was the most capitalist city in the world with the most major businesses there. Ladies and gentlemen, let's look over some of the things that Madawi is going to do. He stated that he's going to freeze the rent. Okay, that's going to be a government subsidy by the way of the New York City Council, New York City government. That's going to be a subsidy, because how they're going to subsidize freezing the rent if the New York City Council or the New York City government doesn't enlarge its span into rent freezing, into a lot of these private companies who own these properties, how they're going to offset the amount that these individual developers, these individual owners of property, were going to raise the property, the rent each and every year. How they're going to do that? They're going to have to expand government. They're going to have to raise taxes somewhere, somehow. Now, granted, this doesn't mean that they're going to raise taxes on the citizens. They can raise taxes on the businesses. They state, well, if you raise taxes, if you raise the rent prices, then we're going to raise your operating costs. We're going to raise the taxes on you operating in New York City. That's what's probably going to happen. I'm really trying to figure out how he's going to pay for this. Now, there's been a lot of Democrats that came out and stated that Madawi is not a Democrat. He's a socialist. Okay, he's a socialist. We can tell right by the policies. Well, he ran on a Democratic ticket. He ran on a Democratic ticket. Can we look at that? Right under his name, it says Dem. Andrew Cuomo, because he couldn't run as a Democrat, he couldn't run as a Republican, he ran as an independent. Okay. Now, as we look at a lot of these campaign promises that Zohran have made, fast, fair, free buses. Now, initially he stated that he was only going to have, a couple of bus lanes, a couple of bus routes, they're going to be free. But now that he's mayor, the entire New York City bus system supposedly is going to be free and safer. I'm just trying to, again, I'm no economist, but I just know anytime that government expands under democratic rule, or in this case, socialist rule, taxes have to raise. Look at the countries in Europe. A lot of them are operating off of socialist policies, off of socialist democracies, where you pay taxes 30 to 40, 45% of your paycheck is being taken, but universal health care, universal bus fare is going to all be free. I wonder if Americans, this is what the New York City residents actually voted for. Okay, Department of Community Safety. What else? No cost child care. Ladies and gentlemen, this is big government as we know it. New Yorkers with children under 6 are leaving a double the rate of all others. The burden falls heaviest on mothers who are giving up paying jobs to do unpaid child care, they're stating. So Zoran will implement free child care for every New York age 6 weeks to 5 years, ensuring high quality programming for all families. Again, free, no cost child care for children 6 weeks to 5 years. City-owned grocery stores. I covered this just the other day. Housing by and for New York. We need a lot more affordable housing. So now the city is going to build housing. Okay, that's just, I guess, the new age of Section 8 housing, so to speak. Okay, they're going to build over 200,000 houses. Cracking down on bad landlords. They're going to go hard when it comes to safety violation. They're going to go hard when there's unlivable living spaces, because people were complaining about rats inside of their apartments, infestations of roaches, cockroaches, all these other things. Some people say, oh, they're just being nasty. No, your neighbor can have roaches, because, ladies and gentlemen, I grew up in Washington, D.C. My family was very, very clean. Matter of fact, a lot of the families in my building were very, very clean, but we still had roaches because the previous landlords never did, when tenants are moving out, did bombing, like say, hey, you guys are going to have to find or even pay for a night at a hotel because we're going to bomb the entire building. I don't remember any place in the Northeast, whether it be DC, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, all these places in the Northeast, okay? Now, granted, DC is below the Mason-Dixon line, so it's still considered the South. But if you lived in DC, you think that you're part of the North. It's one of those really weird things, but I digress. All our places, in some regards, depending on where you live, has some sort of infestation, whether it be rats, roaches, ants, whatever it may be. Where I lived, there, it was roaches, and we cleaned up all the time. We never left food out. Everything was covered. But you turn those lights on, and the roaches freeze. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about. Thank God we never had mice or rats. Okay, that's definitely a New York, New Jersey thing. But regardless, he's stating that he's going to get rid of a lot of these bad landlords, and a lot of the residents there are waiting to see this happen. Taxes on big corporations and the wealthiest New Yorkers. Ladies and gentlemen, do not forget that Elon Musk moved out of California because California was getting too darn expensive, and he moved to Texas. He moved his headquarters to Texas, Austin, Texas, if I can recall correctly. When we look at Zoran and what he's going to do with a lot of these big corporations, these big financial giants in New York, they're going to do exactly what Elon Musk did. They're just going to go to a friendly state that tax them the least, that have them to grow their business even more. Republican ran states. Like, where's Alabama at? I can see people moving to Alabama, West Virginia, Missouri, Utah, South Dakota, North Dakota, a lot of these other states that really don't have large businesses there because of where they're placed at. These big businesses are now all remote. They're hybrid, they're remote. People are going to move to where these businesses are. They're going to start building up the Dakotas, the Montanas. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, a lot of big businesses are going to move away from New York. I just want to read just a little bit of this. This is very interesting. Zoran has a plan to bring down the cost of living through city-owned grocery stores, universal child care, and other bold proposals, and he knows exactly how to pay for it too. Remember I was saying where the money is coming from? Zoran's revenue plan will raise the corporate tax rate to match New Jersey's 11.5%, bringing in an additional $5 billion, and he will tax the wealthiest 1% of New Yorkers, those earning above 1 million annually. And listen, if you're making 1 million annually, you're not rich in New York, okay? 1 million annually in New York is probably around 400,000. A flat 2% tax. Right now, city income tax rates are essentially the same whether you make 50,000 or 50 million. Zoran will also implement common sense procurement reform and end senseless no-bid contracts, hire more tax auditors, and crack down on fine collection from corrupt landlords to raise an additional $1 billion. So basically, he's doing audits. He's going to do audits of these landlords. He's going to do audits of these big businesses. And the only thing I can think of, they're going to run for the border, right? And I don't just mean south of the border, north of the border. They're going to run to the borders of other states. They're going to do the exact same thing that Elon Musk did. He got the hell out of California, and they're going to get the hell out of New York. And they're going to say, you know what? We wanted the people to come into the office. Okay, now that we're going to be moving to South Dakota, we're just going to have people work hybrid. We don't care about all it's a bunch of paper pushers and tic-tac-y people on keyboards, and we're going to use AI for the rest of it, okay? Autonomous AI, and we'll have a couple of robots in the next 10 years. They're not going to even worry about it. I'm telling you, they're going to avoid these taxes. All these tax loopholes, supposedly, Zoran, he's going to get rid of it because he's going in with tax auditors, people who were cheating. And that's a good thing, by the way. This should have been done long time before, even when Eric Adams was in office, okay? Even when he was the mayor. But we shall see. We shall see if this is all the rules. This is all smoke and mirrors. He's going to turn into the same old Democrat that people know and love. He's going to usher in a bunch of illegal immigrants. He's going to, quote unquote, keep tan. He's going to raise taxes on the rich. But nope, they're going to find those tax loopholes and still make millions of dollars. And everything I just said is not going to matter because no one's going to leave New York because people love New York. But I promise you this. If I was to ask a billionaire who lives in New York, what do you love better? Do you love your money or do you love New York? I promise you they'll say their money. I promise you that. So Trump dismisses the Republican losses in recent elections, saying it was because he wasn't on the ballot and due to the shutdown. Now, if you didn't think President Trump was a narcissist, he definitely is a narcissist by that statement alone. I know, cocky, confidence, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a psychologist, okay? I'm not a therapist, but it seemed like a very narcissistic statement that because he wasn't on the ballot and due to the shutdown, that's why Republicans are losing in these recent elections. Now, when the leader blames absence and disaster rather than the policy, that tells us something about the reflection or lack thereof in the party. And for all the communities, representation, accountability matter. So President Trump is stating because he's not on the ballot, that is the reason why all these Republicans are losing. Now, the U.S. government, if you guys all know, has entered record territory, triggering major disruption across agencies and services. And when services stop, believe me, all communities are affected. You feel it. You feel it first with the food programs, transportation, housing enforcement. A shutdown is a crisis. But who pays the highest price? The people who pay the highest price are the people who are middle class and below. These are the ones who are going to be greatly affected. Even when it comes to transportation, food programs, even though those contingency funds that the courts pressure President Trump to release in order to at least pay half of the SNAP benefits, which is a good thing. I'm glad they put pressure on him in order to do so. But nonetheless, can they please come to an agreement so the government can reopen, people get paid, people go back to work, and all these systems that makes America, one of the best countries to come and live in, turn them back on, because this is going to affect everyone. Now, this next story, and I want to let me switch this up very quickly, because this goes right into the Transportation Secretary Duffy, because he's warning that parts of the U.S. airspace may be shut down next week if the shutdown continues and staffing issues aren't resolved. There's going to be massive travel delays. It may seem like an inconvenience, which it is, but this moves toward systematic risk. When infrastructure fails, entire economies and communities get hit. And again, I wonder who bears the cost. It's always the people in the middle class and below, because the high class and the filthy rich, they can charter jets. They don't have to worry about the masses. Okay, they can charter jets, they can charter cruise buses that go across America. They're not really that affected. They may pay a little bit more money, but other than that, ladies and gentlemen, people in the middle class who can afford, economy plus seat, that may not even reach their flight because there's not enough manpower to man these. So, excuse me. So when I look at this, again, this government needs to be back up and running by the end of the week, or we're going to start seeing a lot of these government infrastructures that we lean so harsh to, that we lean very hard on. They're just going to whimper and go away. Then this was a very interesting story. I don't know if you guys were aware that the Mexican president, Sheinbaum, she says that U.S. troops will not be sent into Mexico. Now, I was covering this maybe a couple of months ago. I didn't think that we were still talking about sending troops to Mexico, but she's stating that U.S. troops will not be sent to Mexico, dismissing planned reports from U.S. officials. Now, this shows diplomatic friction and raises questions about interventionism, right? Sovereignty and the global rule of U.S. military posture. And we really have to look at this as Americans, because what are the parallels in foreign policy and domestic power? What are U.S. gaining to sending troops to Mexico? If anything, our troops should be right there on the border, stopping any people who are trying to enter the U.S. illegally. Now, we just can't drop U.S. soldiers into Mexico. That could start a war. And don't get me wrong, this is the president of Mexico right here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. And she's stating that they will not be dropping U.S. soldiers in Mexico. That will start a war. That will start a major conflict between our southern partners. Because don't forget, Mexico and America are allies. For a moment, I need you to reel in your emotions and get rid of the whole illegal immigrants, because again, illegal immigrants coming from every country: Mexico, Central America, South America, Asia, Eastern Europe. We have a lot of illegal immigrants from all these other countries. Now, the most of the illegal immigrants may come from Mexico, but this has nothing about illegal immigration. The troops being sent to Mexico has something to do with illegal immigration. But if the president of Mexico does not allow it, and we violate any sort of international laws with dropping troops in one of our allies' land without their permission, that's an act of war. So hopefully we're not going to do that. Hopefully, if anything, we could just, until the wall is finished being built, we can just man the wall, or the empty spots, or the parts of where the wall is not yet built. We can put U.S. troops there, but we should not be dropping troops in Mexico if the president is totally against that, because that's definitely going to start a war. But nonetheless, I'll keep you guys updated, because believe me, there's so much going on, and that's not even half of it.